Howard, can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Oh, but I can't hear you.
Oh. You can't hear me?
Having trouble with the sound on Zoom today.
Can you hear me now?
I discovered that if I use the...
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? I can't hear you now. Isn't it one of those old commercials for a wireless service? When something like that?
It's Get Smart, right?
Yeah.
So I can either my default microphone.
Ken, can you hear us?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Hello. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Doug.
Oh God, I can't hear a thing.
Andrew, how's your hearing and talking?
So I guess you guys can hear me now, right?
Can hear you, Andrew.
Yes.
You can't hear me now.
Yes.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can't hear
You
Andrew.
can, okay.
Now
I
you
can't hear
can.
any of you. I don't know what's
Hear
going
Andrew.
on.
Are we going to say anything if somebody gets a fly on their head?
All right.
No, we'll do the Pence thing.
I thought on the agenda this week, we were going to talk about the rogue motorcycles, and that's what we said at the last Transportation Committee meeting.
You know, that was put on there in error. The idea was to have someone from Rebel come and speak, and we'll probably have that.
No, not Rebel.
But for this meeting, we don't have anyone. If we want to quickly talk about it under new business, we certainly can. But
It wasn't Rebel. That was last month.
The road. You know, I actually was going up 6th Avenue on a city bike, and it was deafening and really scary. I had to pull over to the sidewalk and wait till this caravan passed.
Yeah.
I'd never seen anything.
Are we starting our meeting already at 6?
No, we're just chatting.
Great. Because I know there are a lot of people who want to talk about Revel and about the helicopters. It'd be great to include them in that conversation too.
Yep.
Yeah, no, Elizabeth, I just asked.
Yeah.
Last meeting, we were talking about these rogue motorcycles, and I thought we were going to have it on the agenda tonight. So just asking why it was not on the agenda. That's all.
Well, what is the exact issue? If we put something on the agenda, it's usually with the idea to have a resolution regarding it, an action item. What's the action item?
Well, you said in the meeting, because I was looking at the video from last, just to see that my memory was serving me, that we wanted to talk to the commanding officers possibly about what they can do, even though because they understand it's a policy citywide not to pursue, but maybe there are other ways to stop.
They're not scheduled to attend this meeting, so maybe for our next meeting we can get them to attend and put that on. I couldn't agree more that that's something that we should grill them on.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. All good.
Okay, let's see who we have. Doug Kleiman.
Can you guys hear me now, by the way?
Yes.
You can?
hear
Oh,
you,
great.
yes.
Okay, I have solved the problem for now, although I get to...
So folks, we need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. We have been a little remiss thinking that the recording was enough. It shouldn't be that complex. Can somebody do that for us? Who hasn't done it in a very, well, nobody's done it in a very long time, but let's see. Who do we have here?
Helen is here.
We have 12 people.
Who has done minutes in the past? Just raise your hand. Okay, you're
Well,
on.
I have, and quite a few have.
Bill, would you be willing to do the minutes for tonight?
It's a little difficult for me right now. My computer isn't working. I'm using an iPad. I don't know how to jump between screens.
Ah,
We're being recorded.
Yeah, what if you just did watch the recording afterwards? Would that work for you?
I can
Yeah,
do it.
that would work.
I can do it. Don't worry. That seems like a lot of work. I'll do it.
Yeah, we've
Thank you.
tried for a long time to have the minutes of our meetings that are recorded, since we're recording this meeting. Thanks to a lot of the work we've done, it's just transposing a lot of that. Hopefully we can have somebody do that in the course of the next couple of days. Pretty simple. And
Yeah,
it's all recorded, it's all public, so.
it is. It is. But it means reliving the meeting again. Well, we envy that. Okay, we should probably start. Welcome to October Transportation Committee. Andrew Albert, Howard Yaris, co-chairs. Item number 1 is discussion of a resolution supporting a bill in the New York Legislature, S07876, which would assign pedestrian safety rating for every motor vehicle model. Howard, did you want to speak about that?
Actually, that's Ken's issue. Ken knows all
Ken's
about it,
issue. Okay.
so Ken will speak.
I'm not totally familiar with the bill, but I'm sure Ken is.
Not totally, but I've read it. First of all, I wanted to say welcome back to Meg.
Yes,
Hi,
absolutely.
Great to
Hi,
see you.
everyone. Nice to see all of you.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
You too.
It's actually S7876. There's no O there.
Oh, there is in the thing that we received, but okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. It's a bill that's introduced by State Senator Gounardis, who represents portions of Bay Ridge. And what it would do is create a pedestrian safety rating for motor vehicles that are registered in the state. And this rating would be posted on the DMV's website. It would be similar to crash test ratings that the federal government, I believe, mandates. But rather than just telling people how they would be protected as occupants of a vehicle, it would tell the potential buyers of a vehicle what threat the vehicle that they are considering buying causes to pedestrians and cyclists.
And Ken, who does that rating?
It would be based on crash results from New York State. Let me get the wording of
And vehicles that have the automated anti-crash technology, which stops the vehicle prior to getting too close to another, I would assume would receive amongst the highest ratings.
Yeah, they say safety features that the commissioner determines are relevant to pedestrian and cyclist safety, including but not limited to automatic collision warning or pedestrian detection features, automatic braking, and visibility would be taken into account. Or any other factors the commissioner determines are relevant to pedestrian and cyclist safety. It'll be made, yeah.
Is there a co-sponsor of the bill in the assembly?
Yeah, I believe, let me, I should have gotten that. Let me see if I still have it up. I know Brad Hoylman is Liz and Liz Kruger are co-sponsors in the Senate.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I don't know whether there's a companion assembly bill
Okay.
at this point. There may not be. The main reason for doing it is that we have a proliferation of SUVs on our streets in a congested city. And while overall deaths in the US, traffic deaths are dropping, pedestrian and cyclist deaths in the US are rising. And it's believed that one reason for this is the rise of SUVs. SUVs, there are 4 reasons why SUVs are more dangerous than regular sedans. One is they're much heavier. 2 is they have a blunt front end design that when it hits a pedestrian or a cyclist, it's more likely to kill them, twice as likely, in fact. And also due to the front profile, there's a blind zone so that somebody who's up high and has this long nose in front of them.
Wow,
Can't see
we've been
the
able to
lights.
get rid of that blind zone on buses and we can't do it on SUVs, huh?
Right, well, there's too much of an engine out there.
So you think that stands for some ugly vehicles?
Yeah, yeah, or some other word for you.
Yeah.
There's.
Do these
Let me
ratings
just
also-
give.
Yeah, go
Let me
ahead.
just give this one statistic. A dozen children can sit in front of Cadillac Escalade and not be seen by the driver. And then finally, drivers' higher driving position means that they're more likely to drive faster, according to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. So those are the main 4 reasons why SUVs are more likely to kill and to injure.
And of course, their weight as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, that was the first thing I mentioned.
Yeah.
And also the ride share that is going through, most of the ride share that is going through our city and our neighborhood right now is those types of vehicles. So those who want ride share also have to deal with the fact that they are large vehicles, as you said, Ken. So how do we deal with that?
Right.
And if we don't get help for the MTA, there may be a lot more ride shares out on the street.
Yeah, and this is just disclosure. This is not trying to prohibit anything. It's just so people know what the situation is.
Yeah, it's public information.
Yep.
I have a motion to support this, for a resolution to support this legislation.
Is there a
I have my
second?
hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jay.
I had a question.
Unfortunately, I entered the bill number and I got a totally different bill, so I haven't read it. Ken, you read it. Does it apply to trucks, buses, every vehicle, motorcycles?
It just applies to motor vehicles. So
Whatever the
presumably-
definition of motor vehicle is in the vehicle and traffic law.
yeah, presumably that would include
Buses,
trucks and
trucks.
motorcycles.
Okay.
A motor vehicle being anything that has a license plate on it, technically?
I think a motor vehicle by definition has to have a license plate.
Well, so that a Revel would even be part of this.
Yeah,
Yeah, motor scooters are vehicles.
but
somebody
I would
said-
guess that their pedestrian safety rating would be less than a Cadillac Escalade.
So Ken or Howard.
I don't think we
this
should make
is-
the judgments on science. I think we need to leave that to,
But it's just a disclosure of what equipment is on the vehicle. It's not a requirement to have anything.
No,
Correct. Disclosure.
yeah, my point is just disclosure. I think whatever we do, we need to just make sure we're following the data and the science on everything. That's all.
Would this have any impact on insurance?
it would have no direct impact, I guess, if the insurance industry wanted to start paying attention to these things. It's conceivable that it could affect rates, but no.
I think there's already a federal requirement that requires the manufacturers, we've seen the stickers, to disclose all the equipment anyway. And when you apply for automobile insurance, they have usually a list of what safety devices you have and so forth and so on in order to underwrite the particular policy. So to some extent, this bill is redundant because this stuff, I believe, has to be disclosed by federal law.
Well,
Anyway.
this bill would quantify. It would be, I believe, a 5-star rating system. So you could
And
get a
also make
one-
it more apparent to the consumer.
Right.
Any other comments? I think someone said they wanted a question, have a question.
That was me. My question.
Oh, hi,
was
hi,
about
Natasha.
insurance. Yeah.
I just posted both the link to the bill and the text of the bill in chat. It excellently sent before I got rid of all the line numbers, so you can ignore the 13 through 18. But again, I want to propose a resolution to support this legislation.
Yes, it's been moved. Has it been seconded?
Seconded.
Yes. Okay, let's vote.
Wait a second, is there anybody in the public that wants to comment on this before we start taking votes?
No hands are up.
I'm just curious, and I agree with Elizabeth to follow the science, but I'm just curious if smaller vehicles like, sedans would also, because of the shape or blind spots, might surprisingly be dangerous vehicles in addition to SUVs.
Yes, blind spots are dangerous.
Curious about that.
Well, they're going to make the determinations not based on what they think is safe, but what the evidence shows in terms of actual crashes.
Yeah, as the text says, it's the frequency of collisions involving a bicyclist or pedestrian reported in the state for such motor vehicle model compared to the total number of such motor vehicle model registered in the state. And then also the safety features that the commissioner determines are relevant.
Paul Fisher just posted a question which says, how will this affect vintage vehicles? Which presumably don't have the latest and greatest that more modern vehicles have.
I think it would include all vehicles. If a Model T Ford is involved in a huge number of pedestrian crashes, it would get a higher rating. But
if someone's still driving one of those, I would be very interested.
I think
But
Lisa is wrong.
it's also in the context of a sale, isn't it?
No, it is not. I think Lisa is wrong in posting. As my read of the legislation says, for every motor vehicle model registered by individuals. So it's data about existing.
So how would it be provided
Yes.
who would be providing what to whom?
Presumably, if I understand the bill correctly, what they would be doing is looking at the crash data and then determining how many of those crashes involve the categories that Ken just mentioned, and then correlating that to the make and model of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So almost by definition, vintage vehicles would not be anywhere near the top of that list because there's so few of them on the road that even if every single one of them were involved in a crash, it wouldn't compare to the Cadillac Escalades that were the topic of conversation earlier.
But in what context would this information be given to people?
How does the bill?
Where would this rating appear?
The bill says it would appear on the website, a DMV website.
Okay.
Oh, so somebody would actually have to know that and go to the website.
Yeah.
So effectively, it's an open data bill.
Who determines the rating? The dealer, the manufacturer, the DMV?
Wouldn't be the manufacturer, you can be sure of that.
I think it's the DMV. I think the legislation calls for the DMV to do this, doesn't it?
I mean, till this is public, till they've actually surveyed every vehicle, that could be quite some time. So the resolution has been made and seconded. Are we ready for a vote yet?
I'm reading the bill and it says the commissioner shall cause to be created a pedestrian safety rating system on the department's internet website. So it is in fact the
DMV
commissioner. DMV itself would be compiling the data.
Does anyone know what the DMV's position on this is? Whether they can do it or whether they want to do it, whether they don't want to do it, whether they can do it? Anybody know?
Well, I think if you're asking, are they in favor of more work for themselves? I'm going to take a wild flyer on the answer to that one, but
I kind of had that in mind myself.
But I think our decision is it a worthy thing for them to do?
Yeah, I think, knowledge is information is knowledge. And if it has buyers make a more informed decision on which vehicles they might want to get, I think it's all worthwhile. But Ken, one thing you didn't mention, does it rate safety on accidents versus other vehicles or just pedestrians and bicyclists?
This would just be pedestrians and bicyclists according to the bill.
Okay.
I would imagine a manufacturer would enjoy bragging rights if they were listed among.
If they were highly rated, yep, you can be sure.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they? Yeah.
No.
That's part of the idea.
Are we ready to vote?
Yeah.
How do you
All
want us
those
to
in-
vote? Do you want us to be on chat or raising our hands?
Can't be on chat, so let's just do a raise of hands.
And participants?
Oh, yeah, I don't see the raise hand feature on this now for some reason.
It's disabled because you're co-host, Andrew, so you
The
have, you
hosts
and
don't
Ken-
see it.
the hosts don't
Okay.
see it.
I'm raising.
So I see 4 virtual hands and Doug, Andrew, Howard, Elizabeth, and William is 5, Rich is 6. Is that everybody? 6 plus 4 is 10. So that's 10. All right, so let's lower hands.
Paul Fisher says no.
Okay, is Paul a member of the committee?
I don't think so.
Yes,
No.
I thought he was. No? He's come to every meeting. I thought he was.
I will tell you right away. Sorry, I should ask the answer to that.
I don't think so.
And the answer is no, he is not.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Glad to have him just the same, but not a member of the committee. Okay, so hands down now, all those committee members opposed, rather, those against. I don't see any hands of either variety. All right, so 10-0. Anybody abstaining? I see 1 hand. Okay, and okay, and then nobody's ineligible for cause. So I have 10-0 to 1-0, and then non-committee board members in favor. Let's see. So Paul, you're going to be a no on that, yeah? Natasha is a yes. So I have 1, 2 for yes. So hands down, please. All those opposed, I'm going to count Paul as no. It's 1. Anybody else? I don't see anybody else raising a hand. And anybody abstaining. So we have 2 to 1 to 0 to 0 on the non-committee board members.
Can I ask who the abstention was on the committee?
Me,
Okay,
you don't see the list?
yeah, I didn't get to it quickly enough.
No problem.
Okay. All right. There is a question in the Q&A, which we'll get to at some point. So thank you for that question, but the chairs have the floor to go to the next item.
Andrew,
Howard, you
or-
want to take
Well,
that
I'll
one?
do it.
Yeah.
We'll take turns. The next item is a discussion of a resolution to daylight all intersections within a 2-block radius of any school or senior center. What this means is there is a significant safety advantage when people in the crosswalk have a better view of the cars coming, and cars have a better view of the people in the crosswalk. When cars park close to the crosswalk, there's a blind spot that clearly results in injuries and unsafe conditions. And so what this resolution proposes is to daylight those intersections that where people with particular vulnerabilities, namely children and seniors, are present, and to try to make those increase safety at those intersections. Comments, questions?
Howard, I'm wondering if we should not also include other types of centers for disabled folks, like a center for the blind, or people who have disabilities. You know, a place like that.
I would view that clearly as a friendly amendment. There are many fewer of those than there are schools or senior centers.
Many
but
fewer,
yes.
yes.
Yes, but I would definitely view that as clearly a friendly amendment. What do people think?
Senior center does that also include a senior home or old age home? Senior center suggests like an activity center.
Well, the goal, the motivation behind this is that you want to increase safety where seniors are out and about. If it's a home where a nursing home, for instance, where people are not going out and about, increasing safety is always a good thing. I don't know how essential it is. But the idea was to increase safety where vulnerable people are on the street and at risk.
Do we know what DOT's position on this is? Has anybody spoken with them?
DOT's here. How are you?
Oh, hi,
Hey,
Colleen.
Colleen.
So we are always supportive of daylighting. We think it's a great initiative. It does create visibility for motorists to see drivers. If you've identified the locations that you want us to look at, we'll be more than happy to do so.
Well, what we've done, Colleen, is we've just set a 2-block radius of all schools and senior centers. That should be pretty, either the DOT can do that or we could do that. It shouldn't be too difficult.
I think it would be helpful if you help us with that, identify the schools and the centers.
We can
I
do
think
that.
would be great. Yeah,
Yeah, it shouldn't be a difficult task.
wonderful.
Great.
So if I could be heard on this, I'm not a committee member, obviously, but the one thing that I would want to make sure that we leave room for is a follow-up to the discussion we had last month and in July about the request by people with disabilities to change certain parking regulations so that their placard would allow them to park a vehicle that allows disability access to the curb. I did a site visit just around the immediate neighborhood of a person with disabilities who brought this issue to our attention, just a 10-block walk. And most of the places that he pointed out to me were intersections. And so I'm glad to talk some more about that during new business and updates. I just want to make sure that we don't preclude the possibility by this resolution of making room for that kind of parking that is placard parking. And Colleen helped me very greatly with last meeting, sending me the magic list of what parking regulations mean and summarizing if it's a white sign with red letters, then the placard can probably be used. And if it's a red sign with white letters, it probably can't. I know I'm oversimplifying, but I would like to leave just enough room so that some of these accommodations might also be made, because it's kind of in the same spirit as the daylighting that you're talking about.
Mark, you're talking about parking adjacent to intersections, not in intersections, I hope.
Thank you. Yes, immediately next is the same way that daylighting would be.
Yes.
But I would raise the question of if there's a need for curb access, there's usually a huge block. It should be at a spot along the block where there is not an impingement on safety. So clearly there's a need for curb. We've discussed the need for curb access in literally every meeting. But I would say that curb access should be in a way that gives easy access for the person who needs access to the curb and doesn't unnecessarily create an unsafe condition for others. So the extent that there's the extreme ends of the blocks are off limits, I don't see that as unduly preventing handicapped people from accessing the curb. I think there's a great amount of space that they could use to access.
We had this discussion. We had this discussion once with Colleen. Colleen, somebody who has this placard that has been referred to earlier, are they only allowed to park where there's a certain sign that allows that, or are these placards? I mean, we noticed there were several of them around disabled centers or whatever you want to call them on a particular block, but we've also seen them right on Broadway where there weren't any and they weren't ticketed. So what is the actual rule for these parking placards?
They can park in areas where it's a truck loading and unloading. They can't park in a no stopping because a no stopping is a very stringent sign. They can park, I think, in a no parking regulation.
They can. Yes.
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Mark raises a really important topic, but I think we're off the topic of the agenda. And I agree with what Mark said at the start, that it's really a new business issue. And to Howard's point, they're really conflicting issues if we're talking about if we're combining them and saying that mobility impaired people should be parking in the spaces that we'd otherwise be daylighting, then we're it's a conflicting issue because these are
is
spaces that
conflicting.
should be left with no vehicles in them. So I think it is an important topic, but we should discuss it separately, not commingle the two.
Okay, I can look at it. Thanks.
I agree. I wanted to ask Colleen, when you do daylight intersections, what is the signage?
I think it's a no standing.
So it would, you, according to your daylighting signage, you wouldn't be able to use a placard there anyway.
You know what? I think you can. I would have to look up the regulation. I think you can with a no standing. I think
No
you can.
standing is more liberal than no stopping.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So with a no stopping, you can't. You would not be able to park there, period, or even load or unload.
And how long?
It's like
can you
97
stay-
in West End.
How long can you stay there?
I mean, if
With
you have a placard, you can pretty much be there all day if you have a placard.
That's a problem if we're
There's
trying
no
to.
time limit. It
That could
depends on
be a
the kind of
problem.
placard you have. If you are an MD, technically and legally, you should really be, I think, at a location near a hospital for 3 hours if you're using your placard. But, you know, again, it goes back to lots of people, I want to say when they park their cars and they put a placard on their dashboard, they're pretty much there all day.
Can I raise a slightly related issue? Because we have daylighted some intersections already, and then we just find that people go and sit in the spots anyway. So we've talked before about bollards or some other ways to make this actually daylighted versus just kind of a free parking spot. So I just wanted to raise that issue. I don't know that we can solve it tonight, but I think it's important we keep that in mind.
So, that's interesting. You should say that because in some areas where there is a bid that can help with the maintenance, when we do daylight an intersection like that, we would probably have a planter and a quick curb so that no one can, pretty much be in that space. Yeah, but that's
Well,
it.
ideally,
The problem is there's lots of places on the Upper West Side without bids.
I know. Just
the ideal situation is where you can ultimately bump out the sidewalk and the crosswalk, making a shorter crossing distance and a more attractive intersection for pedestrians, but that's down the road.
It's capital money.
Yeah.
I just had a question. With the way it's worded now, we're talking about all schools, right, and senior centers, but I would not want us to eliminate the lighthouse, the blind in Lincoln Center, or.
Doug, that's clearly a friendly amendment. We'll incorporate it, no doubt about it.
Sure, thanks.
Shall we vote? Any comments from the community? Shall we call the question? All those in favor on the committee? Who's doing the counting?
I will.
Okay,
So
thank
I've
you.
got Howard, Doug, Andrew. Oops, Howard just moved. Howard, Andrew, Doug, Elizabeth, and Rich is 5 plus 4 is 9. And those are all the hands that I see. Okay, so that's 9. Let's see. So let's go to hands down. All those opposed? I don't see any. Going twice. So 9-0. Anybody abstaining? I've got William and Jay, that's 2. So that's 9-0-2. And is there anybody ineligible because of a conflict? I don't think so. So 9-0-2-0, non-committee board members in favor. Paul Fisher says yes, and you have Mark Diller,
And
and
Natasha.
Natasha is yes, so that's 3. Are there any other, so that's 3. All right, so hands down, thank you. Anybody opposed, non-committee board members? Don't see any. Anybody abstaining? And I don't see any, and no one's ineligible. So 3-0-0-0 for the non-committee board members.
Okay, well, back to Andrew for number 3.
Okay.
If I could interrupt for just 1 second
Yes,
for
go ahead.
Andrew. I saw Helen Rosenthal's name in the attendees. I don't know if that's Julian or if that's Helen.
Julian wrote in chat that it's Julian.
Very good. Okay, so if anybody wants to be promoted from the elected officials, please let me know and I'm glad to do it. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No problem. So, as most of you know, there is a rising amount of aircraft, particularly helicopter noise over our neighborhood. Virtually every night now, I have heard from neighbors, I have heard from other people in the area. Mark has gotten emails. We have Melissa Elstein with us on hand tonight from Stop the Chop, who has organized to try to do this. I had a conversation today with Rob Gottheim from Congressman Nadler's office to see, because Congressman Nadler has been a leader when we had aircraft noise issues in prior years. And I'm afraid the news is not very good. Rob said, what can we do about this? Absolutely nothing. The FAA doesn't want to do anything at this moment. The current administration will not pressure them to do anything. They have met with the local branch of the FAA at JFK Airport. They take their orders from Washington, and Washington is not doing anything. The mayor will not get involved in this battle, unfortunately. There's a lot of other things he won't get involved in, but this is another thing he will not do. And the aviation lobby does not want regulation and will fight it. So we do need to find another way of solving this issue pending the outcome of the election, obviously. But don't look for help from Washington is the clear message I got on this earlier, which is depressing. They're also holding up the congestion pricing benefit for the MTA. There's just so many bad things going on right now. But I would like to hear from Melissa and her Stop the Chop compatriots about what they're experiencing. I did mention to Rob that not only are helicopters endlessly circling over the area, almost always at night, but sometimes in the day, but regular aircraft on their routes to and from LaGuardia and or Newark are flying directly north-south over the island of Manhattan rather than using the rivers. And Rob said they can't get them to change it. It's just up to the FAA, and it's depressing. So Melissa, would you like to add something?
Hi, Andrew. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for inviting me and the Stop the Chop Coalition to this committee. I'm glad that you were able to speak to Rob at Congressman Nadler's office. And yes, that is very depressing, as he and I think 6 other Congress members had put forth that legislation, the Improving Safety Helicopter Act of 2019 in October. And, that seemed to be what could be potentially a great solution. Of course, you have to get other Congress members and then the Senate as well. We'd have to get Schumer, but at least it was a federal ask by Congressman Nadler for the first time, given that he and others have been fighting this issue for over 20 years. So I think we do have to obviously wait, and hopefully there'll be a new administration, fingers crossed, and maybe the Senate will also shift, because nothing will happen with the GOP in control in DC. So having said that, one thing that we're doing with the Stop the Chop Coalition, we still are trying to get a lot of petitions signed to support the Nadler et al. Bill, but we also now want to look at the pending local legislation. And I know City Council member Rosenthal and I believe Chin had drafted some that are currently pending. And we wanted to next figure out, okay, let's look at these local laws and see if there's anything we can do about that. But we'll need some help with that, organize some meetings with the local electeds. We'd like to make this as well a mayoral campaign issue, as well as, the comptroller is going to be turning over, the city council members next year. We have a lot of political positions, right, that are changing because of term limits. So we would like to see this actually as a campaign issue. And how do we make it a campaign issue? Again, we need numbers on the petition. We need to really show that there's a huge community support, because we hear people complaining on Nextdoor and just, speaking to you and other people, but we need to prove, just like we did with the historic district when we were organizing around that, we ended up having, thousands of signatures. So we need help with that. And I'm open to ideas. One thing that came up with one of our phone calls with people from Midtown this week, Andrew Rosenthal and I have been reaching out to people throughout the city, different boroughs as well. And we're going to reach out to New Jersey, but someone who lives near the Empire State Building, he mentioned that a request for a temporary flight restriction that exists, around Trump Tower, but also that Disney had gotten put into some federal omnibus bill, like that could also be something we asked for. So, even maybe there's a way to chip away, because most of the flights, it seems like right now, that are the most intrusive and also that are flying the most, which is ironic given it's a pandemic. I don't see how you can safely sit in a helicopter with the pilot in a small space. I don't see how that's social distancing. But we wonder if there's a way to look at other regulations just to make the industry have to comply. So if we can't get a ban, even though we're seeking this ban, we can also ask for more regulations. For example, Gail Brewer has been asking for a long time to have numbers and identifying words on the bellies of the helicopters. And we're open up to other ideas, because right now they're not a party to the 2016 agreement with the city and the lower Manhattan heliport, because these are all flying from New Jersey. People have the Flight Radar 24 app, which I recommend everyone download, the free one on your iPhone, and you can see they're flying from New Jersey. And a lot of them are from this Fly Anon company that had crashed in the East River. They do the doors off, they do the selfie shoe photo tours. They don't seem like they have a good business reputation from the articles that we've read. So there could be ways in which we try to find other types of regulations, but we're just brainstorming now. So we're very open to getting more members, and you have more expertise in all this than we do. So I leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's gotten out of hand. Of course, 2 days ago, there was a horrific accident on the Henry Hudson Parkway, and we understand why there were helicopters aloft after that. But this is an everyday thing. Elizabeth Caputo would like to add something. Elizabeth?
Yeah, no, Melissa, I've known you for a long time, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I've been working with a number of people related to Stop the Chop over the years, people who live in Manhattan, people who live in Brooklyn. I think we all agree that the noise has been amplified in recent days, and I've gone public to say how I feel about that. And I want to get into the politics of this, but I also feel like we need to bring the private sector into this conversation. There are a lot of folks who do not join these types of community meetings, who are flying privately into and out of Manhattan, and that needs to be regulated in a responsible way. I put that out there as something that has been something that's come to me over the past few months as something that, especially in the COVID era, people won't get on the subway, but they'll get in their private helicopter to drive, to fly across the city to do things. And that just shouldn't be how we operate in Manhattan, in my view. So in any event, I care about this a lot, and I look forward to speaking with the team and remaining on the Transportation Committee on CB7 to try to address it and really prioritize it in a way that we need to get. It's a noise issue. It's also a really poor environmental choice for a lot of people, and for those who are in the 1% who can take a private helicopter somewhere, that's great. But for most everyone else, it's not.
Thank you. Jay's hand was up.
Yeah, I had a question. I had a question for Melissa or Elizabeth or anybody.
Sure.
Is there a compilation of who's operating these helicopters, I mean, there's obviously myriad possibilities, everything from police to press, private helicopters to, I mean, do we have some decently reliable statistics? Because my thought would be, certainly for the activists on this issue, to focus and perhaps put pressure on the organizations that are operating these helicopters. And I think we should know if there are pressure points by who's operating them.
Melissa, do you want to answer? I believe you have the names of some organizations that are flying these things.
Yes, so thank you, Jay, for that question. This came up in one of our calls, and Ken actually was on this call as well. And we currently have a community member on the Upper West Side who is doing research on this. So you could easily go online and search helicopter tours, New Jersey over New York City, and you're going to pull up a lot of these companies like Liberty and, like I said, Flying On. So he's currently doing research on that for us. I think that the industry is supposed to be self-reporting. And so it would be interesting if we could get the information directly from the industry as well. And I don't know if that would require some kind of a FOIL request. Maybe somebody else knows, but I also believe that Gail Brewer's office was supposed to be compiling updated information on this, like way back when we all met in CB7's offices before the federal legislation was proposed by Nadler. So we don't have, we want to get the full list, but we don't have it yet. If anyone else has it on the call, it would be great if we could communicate that together.
Let me jump in for just a quick second to say that April Adams is at a CB9 meeting tonight. She's hoping to join us. She prepared some statistics which have more to do with the number of flights than the companies that are flying them. I'm glad to share them later, but I'm hoping she'll be able to join us and tell us straight from her own research. But if she can't join us, then I'll fill in later with that information.
I think I don't know if it's still true, but certainly on Fridays and Sundays, there was an awful lot of helicopters going to and from Teterboro Airport for people who had private planes and then were coming back either from the Hamptons or wherever, other points in the Northeast. And perhaps I can speak to Rob Gottheim again, and maybe whoever the congressperson is from the Teterboro area or wherever these flights are originating could be of some help in this regard.
I think it would be very revealing as to if we could get the statistics as to who's operating these things.
Yeah, and that's really important, but also is I'm curious from the committee and from the community who is on the call tonight. I know there are at least 24 people who are not part of the board who are on the call tonight. Like, you know, the big issues, like it's noise, it's the environmental damage, it's stuff that's been going on for a long time, but what are the big issues? To me, I think if we could spend a minute or two just taking some notes on what the community really thinks is the big issue. And I know the noise is the big one, but are there other long-term environmental issues that are happening? I'd love to hear from the community tonight on that as well.
I had a question.
I'm trying to hear from the community. I don't know if the community is going to speak up, but if they aren't, that's great. I see a couple of hands raised from the community.
Maybe committee questions first.
I think that we serve the community, so I think it would be great to hear from the community first, if that's possible.
Does anybody have the hands up from the community?
I raised my hand about 5 minutes ago.
I did too.
Yeah, Doug and Ken, and you also have 3 folks from the community. 4 folks from the community.
Yeah, I see 4 folks from the community, right.
And I see Rich Robbins' hand up too. So take him in whatever order you want. let's just make sure we get everybody.
Yeah.
So let's take Doug and Ken, and then we will go to the 4 folks from the community.
So I think I can be helpful here because
Good, Rich.
some people may or may not know this about me, but I was a student pilot. And I happen to be a bit of a hobbyist, which is to get my mind off of all the troublesome things. I actually, from my vantage point where I live, I actually monitor some of the air traffic. I have a scanner that I can listen to all the traffic at all the airports, and a good pair of binoculars. So I have a pretty good feel of who's flying around. First of all, we sit in New York City under Class B airspace, is Class A, B, and C airspace, which is restrictive airspace limited to IFR instrument-rated pilots. And then there's a VFR, Visual Flight Rules, corridor over the Hudson, which is a north to southbound, kind of like a highway. And those that's only used in Visual Flight Rules weather and under a certain altitude. And so what we have a lot of traffic is from, so we're talking about helicopter traffic, private pilots, and then commercial aircraft. So to talk about commercial aircraft for a second, there are traffic patterns. Every airport has prevailing traffic patterns and airways. And the prevailing pattern for LaGuardia, depending on the prevailing wind, remember, an airplane always has to land into the wind and take off into the wind. So if the wind is coming from the east, you will see the aircraft coming up the Hudson River and making a right easterly turn right around City College, Washington Heights area. And that'll go into that runway. If the wind is not coming from the opposite direction, you'll see those aircraft flying over actually Queens and then coming to land from east to west. So again, the wind has a lot to do with where and when these aircraft are coming in. Like Newark Airport, usually coming from the west and then making a southbound turn, or coming up from the Hudson and then not really traversing much over Manhattan. So those are commercial aircraft. Then you have Kennedy, which usually are flying far overhead, either east to west if they're going to Europe, and they're pretty high altitude at that point. You've got Teterboro, you've got Caldwell Airport, Sussex County, Essex County airports, Morristown Airport, Westchester Airport, Kennedy, LaGuardia, Newark. So in terms of the helicopters, you've got definitely sightseeing helicopters. You've got commuter helicopters. You have news helicopters. You have NYPD. You have Coast Guard. You do have Army helicopters too. There's some seaplanes that actually come back and forth, usually seasonal. And what I see a lot of, there are a lot of police helicopters at night. It's the aviation unit. And all of this, by the way, if you have a scanner, is public. You can always listen to the frequencies and you can hear exactly what's being said. And on the VFR corridor, all the aircraft self-announce. They have to self-announce. So, because they're not in the controlled airspace. But the one thing that I know as a pilot is that, as a student pilot, is that there are areas and airports all across America where there are noise abatement procedures. And some of those noise abatement procedures are in effect during the weekend or certain hours. Like, for example, during the US Open, LaGuardia has noise abatement procedures where they bypass during the US Open, right? So there's ways to do that where you can have these noise abatement proceedings effective. Again, it's a federal policy, but you could ask for it for certain days of the week. And there's NOTAMs, which are notice to airmen, where they have they know what they can do and what they can't do. And the noise abatement procedures actually even limit the amount of power that an aircraft can use in throttling up in a certain area. Obviously, New York Metro is an incredibly busy area with 3 major airports. They're having problems handling, with COVID. But anyway, I'm going on too long, but I'm happy to provide any information or anything non-scientific or scientific, because I know a lot about this stuff, and I hope I can just be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, I believe Ken was next.
First of all, I just coincidentally, a helicopter has been flying around for about the last 10 minutes.
Yes, I've heard it too.
I guess we're all sort of in the same airspace.
Yes.
I wanted to ask Melissa, given that what you're mainly complaining about, which are the tour helicopters that, for instance, I understand go to Central Park and fly around Central Park and show people what it looks like from 5,000 feet or whatever. Given
about
that those
1,500 feet sometimes.
1,500, yeah.
Yeah.
We wish it were 5,000. Given that those are now originating in New Jersey, I believe, as a result of the agreement in 2016, what is the utility or the purpose of the Rosenthal and Chin bills that would be local laws, that given that we can't control apparently who comes into our airspace from New Jersey?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Ken. And that's why we wanted to meet with the city council members, legislative reps, and figure out why they proposed these pieces of legislation originally, and they've just been sitting there because we wanted to get a sense of what their reasoning was, and if there was something that we could do. We're also reaching out to people that we know in New Jersey, some electeds we know in Hoboken, and maybe combined with our local New York City regs or laws, and then people who are very frustrated along the New Jersey path. We understand there are people in Jersey City, like I said, Hoboken. Oh, okay. Thank you, Helen. And thank you, Elizabeth, for any contacts you can send us, that we have this almost like a coordinated, if possible, multi-state effort. And by the way, this issue is not unique to the New York metropolitan area. There have been people fighting this in LA. I think there's a bill in LA. Of course, there's the Grand Canyon, there's Hawaii. Those are not, maybe LA would fall under the Nadler bill because that bill doesn't mention New York City. It says urban cities of 8 million or more, I believe. But Hawaii wouldn't. But, it does seem like, and maybe I'm just reaching too far, but, this really is a national issue, if not international.
That's what Rob Gottheim said today too. Hawaii, the Grand Canyon, and New York City are the top three.
Yes. It really is, you guys. It's a huge thing.
On the sightseeing issue, the problems, right?
Sightseeing helicopters.
It is, and I do this in my day job at the World Economic Forum. It's happening all over the world, and in particular across the U.S. So this is a good topic for us to be discussing tonight, and we should be just pointing people in the right direction. It's not just a New York City issue. It's something that requires sort of cross-border
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Since helicopters don't originate and terminate in New York City, it's obviously a cross-border issue.
Yes, one of the things that we are in the process of doing is reaching out to certain experts, from environmental and economic experts. Of course, most of them would charge, but we feel like that's important. I think Elizabeth had said during one of the prior conversations, we need the science, we need the facts, and we believe that as well, even though quality of life, noise and vibration, is a quality of life issue. And it creates a lot of stress, and that can also be quantified. But, one of the groups that we really want to start reaching out to, and we haven't had time yet, are different noise pollution nonprofits, as well as acoustical nonprofits, because there is a growing movement all over the planet about noise pollution. And so bringing in these nonprofits would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Melissa. Let's get a few more hands up. Celeste Miller, did you want to speak? If you could unmute yourself, that would work probably better.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ed, I think people that spoke already covered a lot of this. One thing that I feel as a longtime resident of the Upper West Side that is different for New York City than from Hawaii or Grand Canyon is that many of us have the memory of 9/11. And in terms of quality of life issue, I don't think any of us will ever forget all those helicopters flying around. And whenever I hear it now, my mind immediately goes there. And it really does elevate, particularly now during COVID time, the stress and anxiety connected with all those helicopters flying all over the place.
Yes, thank you. That's a point. Celeste, was that you?
That was Celeste.
Yes.
So Constanza.
Okay, Constance, would you like to speak?
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Hello. Thank you for your service. For me, it's 3 points. It's the sightseeing helicopters. I think that's what we have to focus on. I see them on Flight Radar. They circle all day long. It's the same continuous helicopters that pick up passengers and go on. I think this is what we need to, and they go over the Upper West Side in the 90s and 80s, circle Central Park and go over on the 80s Upper East Side and go down. It's every minute to 2 minutes. I have a helicopter. I'm on 94th and Broadway. I hear, I timed it. I log it. And I would say 80% is sightseeing. On a clear weekend, it's from 9 to about 11. When it's cloudy or rainy, it's great. So it's insanity right now. It was never this bad. So it's the noise and the stress and the sickness comes from it. The second is the environment. We have flocks of birds coming over Central Park. We are known in Central Park for the birds that migrate through, and the helicopters are right in their line. And I'm sure I see them when I do yoga on Central Park in the morning, and you can hear 3 helicopters hovering at 9:30 in the morning, and trust me, they're all sightseeing. The birds all fly up and get antsy. So it's the birds we have to watch. And the third thing is sooner or later, one of us will be dead and killed by one of these helicopters. There was going to be a crash. There's going to be dead people. So those are the 3 concerns. And I think I'm glad to find Stop the Chop. We all have to work together on this because there must be loopholes with Nye on Air and Fly on Air and all these companies. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, did you want to speak?
Well, Rich had his hand up before me. So
oh, I'm sorry, Rich. Didn't see you.
Rich, you got to unmute.
Yeah, 3 things. One, just echoing the safety issue. Having these things overhead is a concern over such a densely populated area. Obviously, the noise is a major concern. And I was just writing in chat, there's a woman, Arlene Bronzaft, who's
I know her.
An advocate. Do you know her? I
Sure.
don't, and I know of her grandson who wrote about her. But her grandson is a Brooklyn CB2 member, and she's been a real advocate for a quieter city. So if people know of her, we should try to get in touch with her and just see if there's a way that she might be involved.
Yes.
The main thing I wanted to
I know
talk about,
Rachel.
though, is the issue of traffic helicopters. And I know, Andrew, you mentioned at the beginning, I don't know if it's a large percent of helicopters. The big concern I have about them is that they're often early in the morning. And last Friday was a great example. It was maybe 5 in the morning. There was an issue on the West Side Highway, and there were potentially 4 traffic helicopters hovering overhead just to get a 10-second shot that they could use on their news of a traffic backup. And for me, having them that early in the morning is just egregious. It woke up many people in the neighborhood. I saw a lot of complaints on Twitter. Also, it seems like something that technology could easily fix. They could put very inexpensive cameras on light posts on the West Side Highway and on other highways around the city, probably save money.
Drones would be quieter.
Yeah, it would be silent. I would imagine DOT would be happy to give them access to the electricity. They could make the feed public, so it would have other benefits of being able to see where there are traffic spots. And save them the money and the pollution and the noise. And I don't know if anyone has, and Melissa asked, has anyone reached out to the local TV stations? Because they have interests other than just complying with the law. They want to be good. One would hope they'd want to be good neighbors, especially ABC TV is in our district. A lot of journalists and reporters live on the Upper West Side, and they're really creating a huge nuisance for the people they're supposed to be serving. So I would advocate that we have a meeting, that we invite the local TV stations to join us and discuss the issue to see if there might be alternatives, and just to make them realize that the community is greatly opposed to their being such a nuisance for the community.
Yeah, I mean, I think the news and traffic helicopters are a part of this, and at certain times of the day, and Fridays and Sundays are a huge part of this. We certainly can reach out and ask them if there's any other way they can think of, with the technology being what it is, to get the normal traffic choke points recorded in another way, rather than a hovering helicopter at 1,500 or 2,000 feet.
Yeah, and I see Melissa wrote that there's a First Amendment issue, and I'm not talking about banning free speech here. I'm talking about working with them to try to find creative solutions so that they're not antagonizing the neighborhoods that they're supposed to be serving, in which they do their business in which many of them live. And just to make them realize that the neighborhood really is offended that they would create such a nuisance.
Right, but you can of course see that one channel doesn't want to be outdone by the other, so they're all going to have helicopters, pretty obviously. But yes, I think we can certainly reach out to the news. We can reach out to the TV stations, and I'm not sure that the borough president hasn't already done that, but if April joins us after being with Community Board 9, we will ask her that. Jay has his hand up, and then Mark, I think, wants to speak.
Just a quick suggestion: if anyone's in touch with any of these TV stations, we might suggest that they do what they do with their reporters on a lot of occasions and trips on Air Force One, which is to have a pool where they could just have one helicopter with a feed,
and share
various news. I mean, at least one helicopter is better than 4 or 5.
That was one of the points I was going to make. So, and most of the points I was going to make have already been made. So that's great, and I won't repeat. I did want to mention one thing that it is interesting that the borough president and council members were trying to get involved in this, because it is, sometimes we're a city, a state, or 50 states. Sometimes we're one country, and air travel is an area where we're one country, and it is the principal regulation of air travel is by the federal government, which is frustrating to us because it isn't often responsive to local concerns and interests in the way that this discussion has highlighted, even though I completely agree that it should be. That's why I was glad that we supported the federal legislation, because that would be the most comprehensive way to rein this in. I accept the politics of it as described, and without bringing partisan politics into the community board chair's recitation of it, it is the case that the legislation, for whatever reason, has not been adopted, and therefore we're looking for other ways. I assume that the local legislation is aimed at aspects of servicing and facilitating the air travel, as opposed to where it can fly itself, and I'm all for supporting that. The thing that to the point that Rich was making, many of those cameras already exist on light poles. If you look at New York One's traffic report, it actually has a map that has red, yellow, and green lines on the major arteries leading into and out of New York City. And it actually switches to cameras to show you the congestion, as if looking at traffic is something that we all want to do. But they feature this already, so it's already there. That infrastructure, much of it exists. So this is, I believe, as Andrew was kind of referring to, this is as much a vanity exercise in branding the helicopter as it is. And if we can reverse the equity of branding the helicopter, That I think is a very interesting way that does not violate the First Amendment, because we're not saying you can't fly your helicopter. We're just saying we're taking notes and we're not pleased. So I would be happy to facilitate meetings that would include the right folks from our committee and the right folks from the community to push this forward in any way that makes sense, whether that be at a future meeting of this committee or in a smaller group that we could convene and then report back to the committee on. Whatever you guys think is right, I'm glad
That's
to
one of
try
the
to
next
help.
steps I think we need to take, yes.
Thank you.
I know I spoke already, but I'd like to just add a quick.
Go ahead, Doug.
So in my non-scientific, just sort of, monitoring the radio traffic, one of the things where I've observed the most concentration of helicopters and noise is around a news incident, right? So you have the regular traffic helicopters that happen during rush hour and on weekends, and they'll hover. But then you have, if there is a crash or fire, a water main break, protest, whatever it is, where the helicopters are going to want to get aerial coverage, and they all are competing. So I actually will listen, and you can hear, ABC and CBS and NBC helicopters, and then you have a real problem, because I've actually heard this in real time, where the NYPD has to ask the newscopters to clear out because they're involved in an active scene. And I believe that there's, you can hear them, make way for obviously they don't want to become part of this story. But that's something that, when that happens, I've observed 4 or 5 helicopters in the same general area at the same time. And that's really noisy and probably pretty dangerous.
Absolutely. Does anybody, we will all follow up on this issue from various vantage points. What's the name of that application, Doug, that you can aim at an aircraft and find out its registration?
Yeah, there's a number of them. Anytime you get a tail number, you can pretty much Google the tail number and it'll tell you where the aircraft is registered. But there are a number of applications.
I think we need to attack this from the federal, the local, and the interstate, as well as talk to our local news folks. And I will be in touch with the borough president's office to see how far they've gone or the city council has gone and see if we can elevate this to the next step.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. I see AA and the attendees. Is that April Adams? Yes, it is.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
April, I was referring to, but not sharing the statistics that you gave us, which largely talked about the decrease in volume. But can you talk a little bit about one of the questions that came up for you was having to do with the outreach and work that your office and Gail's office has been doing on this with respect to trying to regulate this from a local perspective?
Absolutely. So as you all know, Gail, as well as Congressman Nadler and a lot of other folks as well, Councilmember Kalos, they have been working on this issue now Gail, for years. And last year we did reconvene the helicopter task force that Gail begun prior to my time with the BP's office. And we basically gathered all the elected officials together, city council, as well as state representatives, to find out what can be done around this issue. Of course, I think I came in a little bit where you, Mark, were mentioning how difficult it is because of the federal regulations. I spoke to FAA last week, and they're a little hesitant to regulate low-flying aircrafts, and so that it's not really on their radar. So we'll have to push it from that angle. This is an ongoing quality of life concern, and you really do need to actually make sure that this is a priority and that you handle it. When I spoke to EDC last week, of course I sent you those stats. So we know that, the flights have decreased out of the heliports, but EDC stance at the moment is that they think that there's a lot more tourist flights coming out of New Jersey that's causing this traffic, which has always been the issue. But then B, they think that because a lot more folks are working from home, they may just be noticing the noise more often, which I'm like, okay, that might be a possibility as well. So we're really trying to attack this thing at all angles. Honestly, any sort of innovation or any sort of creative thinking towards this issue would be very helpful and much needed. So,
thank you for that. I'm sure people are noticing it more because perhaps they're working from home, but these are frequently nighttime massive helicopter raids, and folks were home in the evenings before as well. So there's definitely been an uptick. And if it's from New Jersey, if we can identify where they're coming from in New Jersey, we can ask Congressman Nadler to reach out to that congressman and or others and try to regulate this somehow.
Absolutely. I know in the past it was mainly, I spoke with the Eastern Regional Helicopter Council, and they have said that, there can be some bad actors as far as tourism helicopter operators. And, in the past, it's really been focused around like Fly Nyan, who I think mainly flies out of Kearney and Linden. Is it New?
Yeah, Linden has been a problem. Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, there you go.
Maybe Gail can get us a grant for surface-to-air missiles.
Surface-to-air paintball. Let's not promote violence.
Yes. I think we've taken this issue as far as we're going to tonight. We will keep you all posted as we work towards a solution, because we need to get a solution to this one way or another. Howard, you want to move to the next item?
Yeah, the next item we have is new business. Basically, it's a follow. Well, before new business, it's the follow-up on outstanding business.
Yes.
As we all know, the mayor made the restaurant seating program permanent, which is a lifeline for restaurants. My suspicion is that over the next couple of months, we on this committee are going to see issues arising regarding how broad a space restaurants can take over. In this great weather, it's very nice, but eventually there's inevitably going to arise some conflict over the space they use, and I have a feeling that somewhere down the road we're going to be hearing more about that. So there's the follow-up on that. I just wanted to give an update on that. Curb usage, we've been talking about curb usage for quite a while. Loading zones, and we also have an outstanding resolution on West 72nd Street. So I asked Colleen if there's any update on any of those issues.
Howard, I had a quick question.
Can we? Well, it's
so Howard, the
restaurant.
What you've asked, we are still looking into that. I don't have a definitive update as to when I will have the information. So let me check again with the division, okay? Because I know it's they have it and they're looking into it.
Great, because we raised issues with access to the curb and the West 72nd Street. Everyone's looking forward to seeing that. Jay, you had a question?
Yeah, Howard, I we all read about the mayor saying that the usage of the streets by the restaurants would be permanent. When he says permanent, do you know if he really meant kind of open-ended until the virus issues, hopefully, God willing, are resolved, or literally permanent?
Jay, your guess is as good as mine.
Well, we have Colleen here. Maybe she knows.
So Jay, I think we're still working logistically with City Hall on, fine tuning all of this. I think once we have more information, we're definitely going to share that with the community board. I know there's some other community boards who already asked the same questions, or who are also thinking the same questions as what you just posed. So when I have more information, we'll share it with the boards.
Yeah, I think we've all been very supportive of throwing a lifeline to these restaurants and giving them space so that they can survive. But if we're talking about permanent or even long-term, we have processes for things like sidewalk cafes, et cetera. And if these things are going to be even semi-permanent, I think that we need to have some process of evaluation for each one, the way we do with sidewalk cafes. So
Cafes, yeah.
we weigh all the various
Right.
consequences, intended and unintended.
Yeah, I think if this is something, if this is something that's going to be permanent, you're absolutely right. That there should be some mechanism where the community board is involved, just like with weighing in on the sidewalk cafe permits. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Jay.
Thank you.
Colleen, while you're at it, is there any move by DOT to mandate some sort of lighting on the street side of these in the street set up tables so that a motorist or bicyclist or anybody does not hit one of these structures?
So the structures have reflectors. They're supposed to have reflectors on them, so that it's clearly visible. Additional
Are they
lighting.
checked? Is there checking to make sure they are?
Yeah,
I remember the accident in Greenpoint.
Yeah, we have our inspectors that go out there and they check to make sure the structures are in compliance and that they do have reflectors on them.
Great, thank you. Someone's hand was up.
Yeah, mine.
Okay, Rich.
Yeah, just on this topic, I'm a huge fan of the outdoor dining. I think it just adds just a great new dimension to New York City. Obviously, much more so in the nice weather, but it just really enlivens the streets. I find it wonderful. Having said that, I think it was thrown together obviously on a last-minute emergency basis, and the way it was done is really extraordinary in getting it set up so quickly. And yeah, there should be community involvement, there should be other issues, but given the circumstances, I think it was spectacular. Having said that, I think there are ways that in making it permanent, it could be, there's potential room for improvement. And in my mind, that really gets back to sidewalk use and the need for, if we're converting the sidewalks into space for restaurants, which again, I think is wonderful, there are places where there's need for more sidewalk space. And I think that there's an argument for enlarging the sidewalk to make this happen. That way you don't have situations in some areas where waiters have to walk through bike lanes to get to tables, or where there's enough room for people to actually walk through a sidewalk while the restaurant's also using it as sidewalk space. So I do think we should have a community discussion. I think we should put it on the agenda even as soon as next month and really talk through the issues. But I would love to see us put together a resolution calling on DOT to explore what it would take to make this permanent in a really strong way, such as enlarging sidewalks to make this an even better experience than what was already a great outcome to a horrendous tragedy in the city.
Actually, you all did a much better job of explaining the issue than I did. When I first introduced this, what I was alluding to by saying that there are going to be issues regarding on how the space is used is exactly what everyone else has been saying, that it's great now, but eventually there are going to become issues on how much space and how the space is used. And we presumably, as Jay said, the community board is going to have input into that. Any other comments on this? Ken?
Not on restaurants. Can I move on to something related?
Absolutely.
Okay. Open streets. I think we've benefited not just from having additional recreation space during a pandemic, but the streets that are open streets are undeniably safer. They're much easier for delivery vehicles to park and unload. They're quieter and more pleasant streets, and they also reduce overall traffic in the neighborhood by implicitly discouraging driving. So I would like to see us have a discussion in November about continuing these really great amenities for our district.
Great. Any further comments on that? I've been hearing from a bunch of people as well to try to make these amenities like the restaurant seating more permanent. So any comments, questions?
Yeah, Howard, I was...
Mark has his hand. Oh, Mark, and then Jay.
Thanks. I just want to make sure that when we have that discussion, whenever it is, that I want to make sure that the precincts are there. The West End Avenue open street was, there's a great deal of confusion in my mind about exactly how that's being monitored and administered. And to the extent that we talk about extending this, I think we need to be a lot clearer than we are right now. I think it's a little bit like what you were talking about, the open seating restaurant issue, where a great idea was pulled together at the drop of a hat to address a need. But if we're going to make it, go forward, that we would need to understand a little better how that's going to be made kept safe, because I've heard things about barriers being knocked over and how they get set up and so forth. I just want to make sure we have a complete discussion, and I think we need the precincts for that.
I couldn't agree more. This is a major change. First we have the restaurant seating, and now we have the open streets. And to the extent these are made permanent, there's a great need to have buy-in from all the constituencies and clear rules. So yes, it should be on the agenda, and the precinct should weigh in, and the BIT should weigh in, and as many people as possible, because we all have a vested interest.
I'll work with the chairs to make sure that we coordinate with the precincts on that.
Yeah, and you know what, I'll take this back to my colleagues, but I think it's fair to say that if both concepts are, if we decide to make it permanent, well, obviously they have to come to the community board and give a presentation about it, and in terms of the process and what the guidelines and criteria would be. So, I mean, I'll discuss it with Borough Commissioner Pinkpart tomorrow in our staff call and give him a heads up about it.
Great. Who else? Jay, did you want to say something?
Well, I agree with Mark that the precinct needs to be involved. You'll recall at the full board meeting, I asked as an inspector, I guess, Yamaguchi, if he was aware of the problems that have developed on 96th Street, the intersections of Broadway and West End, and the disastrous situation. And his response was that they were aware of it, but he kind of shunted it off to DOT. But I agree, the precinct needs to be there. The responsibility for maintaining and instituting it fell to the precinct, notwithstanding the mayor's initial announcement that every open street needed a partner, a charitable organization, a non-government organization, to partner with them. They went ahead and did it anyway. So there are all kinds of issues. I had sent you a couple of emails. I very much want to have a discussion. I live on West End Avenue, and I think I have a very clear daily picture of exactly what's going on there. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to hear from other people, particularly if we can get other people who live in the area to participate in the discussion.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, Jay, that the precinct and the other constituencies need to be involved. This is a big change to the streets, and I think we all agree on that. Any other questions?
There are some folks in the attendees. I see three hands raised. Oh, you don't see them? Oh,
so I do see them. Sorry, Jessica Spiegel, then Christina Weil, and then Peter Artisan. First, Jessica, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. I live on 95th Street on the West End, and I love the West End open street.
You're very scratchy.
You can't hear you.
I can't hear you well. It's very scratchy.
About this, and
Your audio's breaking
I'm
up.
really happy to hear that that's an issue next month. But I was just wondering if, like, in the interim, maybe we could do something about the barriers, because quite frankly, right now, all the cars use it as an obstacle course, and they're pretty much driving down West End, and you're like dodging in between them, especially in between like West End, in between 95th and 96th, because everybody is like just driving in front of the school. And I've almost been hit like before there, and I mean, we all know that corner. So like the barriers have been broken. So I don't know if it's maybe we could get different barriers or more robust ones. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but right now it's like kind of hard to use it. And with all the work going on, Riverside Park is crowded. So like be over there sometime. So, West End is like such a great place to like walk and be. Yeah, so I was just calling about that. Thanks.
Yeah, well,
Hi, Jessica, it's Colleen. I just want to tell you that the NYPD, the local precinct, reached out to me regarding additional barriers. So we're working on that. We'll see what we can do to provide more sturdy barriers or see where they can get that as well. But they reached out to me today, okay?
that'd be great, Colleen.
Hey, Colleen, is DOT looking at where traffic that is diverted from West End Avenue is going? Are you looking at that at all?
Well, we are, and there was a few, not many, but I want to say some residents reached out to me about West End Avenue and about the closure, and they were not happy about it. They felt that it was creating traffic congestion in the area. But we found out that there was an event that was going on that contributed to the congestion in the surrounding streets. So yeah, we are looking at the traffic when we do these temporary closures, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I would certainly hope so, because to not look at the traffic, which has become dangerous to automobiles and pedestrians at those intersections, it would be criminal not to look at what's happened as a result of the closures of West End Avenue.
I think we all agree that this needs to be carefully looked at in the context of changing the street space. Let's see who's, we have Peter and then Jesse Zhu.
You also have Christina Weil, I think it is.
Yeah, who moved down in the list. I'm not sure why.
You want me to speak or wait?
Peter first, and then Christina Weil, and then Jesse.
So, hi, thank you all for addressing this. This has been tremendous for our neighborhood. I run the Business Improvement District north of 96th Street, and it has been tremendous for the restaurants up in our neighborhood. We just do it on Saturdays and Sundays, and the restaurants are doing as well as they can right now. And we're also getting a really positive response from residents. There are some concerns about cars coming through the barricades. We've had motorcycle gangs come through the barricades. We've got delivery or electric bikes that are going too fast. And we've got scooters, but we haven't had an accident. And DOT, to its credit, just did a tremendous job of rolling this out. And they took a gamble with us because we're a bus route and a truck route. And we have worked with them, and they've just done a really good job. We have asked for Columbus also from 110 to 106. And that is on hold, and they're reluctant to give it to us because of Frederick Douglass being also closed down. So we'll see where it goes. But I will say that it has been very successful. Going into the winter, I'm not sure what's going to happen, and nobody is, of course. But for the moment, it's been really great. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to reiterate, Mike, your concern to Colleen in that there's always a problem with enforcement, but to the extent we can minimize that problem by having sturdier barriers or more obstructive barriers, that would be an easy and enormously helpful fix. So I urge you to look into that, Colleen.
I want to ask Peter a question.
Okay.
Ken?
Peter, just out of curiosity, how are you handling the M7 and M11? They're not diverted, right?
They are.
Oh, they are.
Yes, we offered to create a larger emergency lane and allow for them to come through going 5 miles an hour, but it was decided not to. And so what we do is when we're closing down the street between 11 and 12, we wait for the last bus to pick up everybody, and we try and notify everybody at the bus stops that this is it. So this past Sunday, I guess, I waited there for half an hour waiting for a number 11. And it finally came and picked up the one person that was waiting for it. But anyway, that's how we have handled it. We also had a request from DOT about a week and a half ago to open the street up for a oversized truck at 8 p.m. And we waited for an hour and it never showed up. So I'm not sure what happened there, but we've tried to be flexible in terms of accommodating those types of things. And DOT, like I said, has really done a tremendous job with making this work because we were not a likely location. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Christina?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I'm a West End neighbor at 93rd and West End, and I just wanted to voice my support for open streets. I have 2 young children, and it's been amazing to be able to just walk outside with them. I want to echo what another person said to people before me about the safety issues, which I think we all are aware of. The barricades are dilapidated. I mean, they're falling down. I have called a number of times 311. I even called 911 at one point as a driver sped by me. There just doesn't seem to be a good sort of solution for people who are noticing problems on the street. And like, you know, like I noticed somebody who was driving too fast. I stopped and talked to her and she sped off. And then I was able to get her license plate, but there was no way to report her. You know, there was no way to report the dangerous activity, including calling 911 and speaking to police officers. So all I would say is I think this is great. I think we should find some solutions to make these open streets workable during, you know, this COVID period and perhaps beyond. I think signage is a huge issue because a lot of people who turn on these streets have no idea that they're closed. And the signs that are there now are like falling down. You can't read them. They're not like large enough font. If you put a sign up that clearly said it's 5 miles an hour, maybe people would see it better. I don't know. And then my other comment, and I know this involves community partners, is just a way to activate the streets. It is getting colder, but I know that there are a lot of kids and families who use it to walk, but I go out there and I play badminton with my kid. And like, it's so much fun. And it would be fun if there were like, I don't know, just a moment where people knew that they could come out and we could play a round robin together. You know, I know it involves community and it involves time, but I think there's a way to make the open street on West End and elsewhere really a fun space during this, you know, sort of difficult time. So anyway, thank you so much.
Badminton is permitted in Riverside Park.
Okay, thank you.
Jesse, Zoom.
Hi, this is Jesse. I live in Upper West Side near Riverside Drive. And I thank Mark and Howard invite me to this meeting. My question is simple regarding street parking. And recently, I saw a lot of out-state license plate vehicle parked in Upper West Side for a whole week because the pandemic season, city changed parking regulation. And I believe your board already submitted a request to study this situation in April 2020. But this whole week of parking is a new situation in the Upper West Side. So my question, does the DOT will study this kind of issue for us for residential parking?
Actually, it's a great question. We adopted a resolution almost a year ago. And Colleen, could you tell us the status of the DOT's response to that request for a study of the curbside use?
And again, I don't have a response for that because with the pandemic, everything was on hold. So I can find out though about the residential parking.
Okay, the request was actually broader than that. It was to figure out what was going on with the curb and find out and find the best use for this space. This is a concern we hear at almost every meeting, and so the sooner we hear about it, the better. And obviously, the pandemic makes everything just more difficult. So I understand how it could delay things, but it also heightens the need for some kind of good
But
thought.
we have asked repeatedly for a pilot of residential parking permits.
That we've been very specific on, and I will just note that there are still, I'll just anecdotally where I live, there are dozens of apartment buildings, and there's literally not one loading zone. So it's a major problem, Colleen.
No, the outside state the motorists took advantage of this parking regulation, change up spot once a week. They come to New York City because Airbnb is cheaper now. They come here for 1 week and park in the street like a free parking.
Well, if I could just jump in on that, Mr. Zhu, I wouldn't overlook the possibility that permanent residents of the Upper West Side are registering their cars in other places because I'm just going to speculate that the insurance rates might be lower or other regulatory benefits from doing so. So it may not be the case that we would lose the volume of parking. We would just reap the benefit of having those parked vehicles registered where perhaps they're used and stored.
Yes, that's true, Mark. Remember all those cars from Vermont?
and Michigan also.
And Michigan, yeah.
Yeah, I saw this license only once a year in past years, like a Christmas season, Thanksgiving. Now
they may very well be New Yorkers.
But
they're here now. They're here.
Very good.
Just point out that legally, there's no distinction made between New Yorkers and any other state for the use of the street space in New York City, which is another reason why we requested this study of how the curb space is used. But right now, that's the situation, and again, we want it looked at to see if there's a way that the situation can be improved.
There's
all right, thanks very much.
One more hand, and that's
Jane.
Jane Thompson. Hey, Jane.
You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I live at 96th and West End, and I would question why 95th to 96th Street was included in that street thing between the highway exits and entrances at 95th and 96th, and now all the school buses in that block. It just, I don't see hardly anybody using it. A few times I've been out there, I felt like I had to yell at people to get off the street because there were cars going back and forth all over the place between 95th and 96th. So I think that it goes, I believe, from 87th to 96th, and I would wonder if they might reconsider and make it 87th to 95th Street maybe, or something. Just a thought. It's also a problem. I'm handicapped and I can't come home on a car or a bus because they can't drive up West End Avenue technically, except from way downtown because of the one-way streets and the street closed. And what I do is just get off the car or the taxi at the bus stop. So far, nobody's objected to that. Right at the corner of 96, the southeast corner.
Nice.
Well, as we
Cars are
discussed,
allowed on West End Avenue. They just have to go 5 miles an hour. So they should be able to take you to your door.
right. And I'll also point out that these programs, the restaurant seating and the open streets, they were put together hastily in response to a medical pandemic. We will give more thought to them and try to improve upon them over the next few months as the sense, hopefully the sense of urgency gets reduced. Anyone else on old business, outstanding business?
I see Peter Arnston's hand up again. I don't know if that's a redux or.
I think Rich has his hand up.
Yeah, I'll yield to Peter first, and then I have, in case he wants to talk on this topic, I just want to go back to the topic of accessible parking.
I just wanted to respond. Christina had mentioned about the signage. We've got some really great signage that came from DOT. It's 2 foot by 2 foot, white and red. I still get cars going through. People, certain people will just ignore things or somehow somehow just be unable to read them. It's really incredible. We patrol the entire length, usually on bicycle because it's easy to go from one end to the other, or to accompany certain cars or emergency vehicles. And that helps tremendously. That's something that West End does not have. And we found it to be somewhat helpful. So just those were my 2 comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I want to get back, since Mark raised the issue of accessible parking. One thing I've noticed in my neighborhood, which is 103rd Street near Riverside Drive, is that there are a great number of cars with accessible permits parking on the service road on Riverside Drive. And it seems that they're not ticketed. They're able to park there overnight, basically every night. And I'm not sure what the right solution is. I think if there are people who have a real need to be able to park near their homes, I wonder if we should have something more permanent and more legal than this illegal, but potentially necessary parking. I don't know what the answer is. I just want to raise it. There's also an elderly couple that has a first responder expired tag and they park on the sidewalk on Riverside Drive many nights, and they seem to not get bothered either. So it seems that there's this this lack of enforcement, which in some cases might be appropriate, but I wonder if we should have accessible parking spots that are official spots, probably on Riverside Drive, not on the service road, which is very narrow. But I just want to raise the topic.
Thank you, Rich. Anyone else?
Rich, people are parking on the sidewalk. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
You think there would be
above 103rd Street? There are a number of cars that park on the sidewalk. It's a very narrow service road, and a lot of those cars have accessible permits. As I mentioned, one of them has an expired EMT permit, and I've seen the couple get out. I don't know if they're still active EMTs or if they're just somehow affiliated with an ambulance company. But they park a Lexus on the sidewalk basically every night.
Huh.
And have for years, like far before COVID.
Well, I'm not sure that should ever be legalized.
Yeah.
If that's what you're suggesting.
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting if there's a need for accessible parking for people with valid accessible permits, maybe we convert regular spots to accessible spots. But I think we don't want to encourage people to, or even allow people to park on a narrow street, either on the street blocking traffic or on the sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
And the precinct doesn't do anything about it.
Anyone else? Okay. I think it's your turn, Andrew.
So I guess we have to speak about next month's agenda. I think that is the next item. We will certainly know more, considering it would be the second week of November. We will know a lot more about the MTA's fate as a result of the election. Do we want to invite Revel and any of their affiliate scooter companies to attend? I think somebody mentioned that at the beginning of this meeting.
I think you draw a card if you did.
Well, we could talk about that offline.
Okay.
Well, I understand there's some interest in it, and we'll discuss what kind of issues we could bring up.
Okay, we can do that. Let's see, what other items stand out that we need to address? We can possibly get somebody from EDC or somebody else to speak about the helicopter issue. If people are still interested in pursuing that, maybe we will have a little more news on that item. Let's see. What other outstanding? There was a park through the park issue that we discussed several meetings back for bicycle access east-west in the park. We were going to speak with either the Conservancy or a task force that the police were going to set up about devising routes across the park that were not the transverse roads, but other routes. Do we know where we stand with that, or would that be joint with Parks Committee? I assume it would.
My recollection is that we've asked Colleen for an update on that because Colleen was going to, or DOT was going to be the lead agency, and that they started to work on it, and then COVID hit and the ability to follow up was inhibited.
DOT would be the lead agency considering it's in the park?
That was my understanding of how the answer came back to us. But Colleen's here, so I don't want to speak for her other than to frame that as a question.
Sure. Jay has his hand up. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let Colleen know, you already know because I sent it on to you guys. Last month, I put in a FOIL request for a copy of the City Bike contract and any information, statistics, et cetera, that the city has on accidents between, accidents involving operators of city bikes. The response I received from the Department of Transportation was that they would get to my request in March. That's really incredible.
Well, that's when COVID hit, but yeah. Yes.
Simple enough.
Well, I look forward to hearing what comes of it. Any other new business?
Howard?
Yeah, go ahead.
Could we ask Colleen if there's been any update on the Cross Central Park route task force? Because bicycling is not showing any signs of abating. It continues to increase, and cyclists really need safe ways to get from the east side to the west side and vice versa.
Oh, I would amplify that, Kim, by saying that COVID hit, and I understand how a lot of projects were sidelined by COVID, but this is a project that is essential given for COVID. It should be looked at as a COVID project. So with that introduction, Colleen.
Yes.
Colleen, are you still on?
She's muted.
Oh, she's muted.
Yeah, I'm here. You know, Ken, we have not decided on creating a task force, and I don't know if we're going to create a task force, but what I've mentioned in the past and what I continue to say is that we will work with the Conservancy and we will work with Parks to see what we can do to make the improvements. And if we do have something to present, we will come to the board and present it.
Okay, my recollection from our meeting, I forget when it was. It was January of 2019.
No. January of 2020.
2020, all right.
It just feels like it was that long ago.
It feels like, yeah. It was pre-pandemic. Was that you were committing to a creation of a task force? That's what I thought.
I agree completely, Ken.
Yeah.
I remember that. So please keep that in mind, Colleen, because we're very anxious to have that move forward. We also spoke. Go ahead, Howard.
Oh, it's just whether it's a task force or not. This is a matter of some urgency. So, however it's achieved, there's a great need for it in view of COVID.
Yeah, we don't care what it's called. We just want it to move forward.
Right.
We also spoke about a requirement, and maybe we need state legislation for it if somebody's willing to sponsor it, and we can see if they want to, that all taxi companies and for-hire limo companies, when purchasing new vehicles, must purchase ones with the anti-crash technology that is now available in those vehicles. Surely you remember that discussion. I think it would be great if we could find a sponsor for such legislation. I will ask some state officials if they'd be willing to do that, because the technology is out there. If we can save lives by mandating that they purchase this technology, it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Could I get back to Central Park? I mean, the resolution we passed close to a year ago was done as an urgency just in the aftermath of a fatality. And I'd hate to have it lose momentum because of what's happening. As Ken mentioned, more people are riding than ever. And I'd hate for it to just lose momentum, not get it the attention it needs, and for there to be another fatality. And as we talked about in that meeting, there is no safe legal way for bicycles to cross the park.
Except at 72nd Street.
That's correct, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there are plenty of signs in the park telling cyclists where they cannot go. There are not signs in the park telling cyclists where they can go. And cyclists, if you're using, as I've done, if you're using Google Maps, it steers you to go in the transverses. And I can, flat out say the transverses are not currently safe for cyclists.
And they shouldn't be used by cyclists either.
Yeah, but
when a bus is on them, there's no room for anything else.
Yeah, but if you're trying to follow the law,
I've seen cyclists on the sidewalks on the transverses, believe it or not, and that's a little hairy also.
Yeah, and we need clear direction for cyclists where they can go, because if you follow Google Maps, which is what I would imagine many cyclists do, they're being steered to something that's putting their life at risk. There are no signs in Central Park on where you can go, and there's a number of real easy, quick, low-hanging fruit fixes that we proposed close to a year ago.
And there's some logical places that bike paths through the park, east-west, could be constructed.
Yep.
Which would not inhibit parkland, basically.
Yeah.
Is there any value in getting the Conservancy to the next meeting, a joint meeting of Parks and Transportation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've done that, and we've asked DOT to meet with the Conservancy and with the precinct and with the Department of Parks to come up with quick solutions, and that just never happened. And granted, we've got extraordinary circumstances, but as Ken said, those extraordinary circumstances make a fatality that much more likely. And it's something where there are a number of things that can be done quickly, and we'd love to see those happen right away.
Have we brought this to Board 8's attention?
Yes.
Okay. Did they have a position on this? They agree, or?
They generally agree. There's Borough Board this coming Thursday. I can chat with Alida Camp is the chair of CB8. She's expressed support for the idea. I can bring it up again.
Yeah, maybe a dual board would have a little more ammunition. I don't know that it would in this climate, but maybe it would.
Couldn't hurt.
Doug, did you want to speak on this?
Not on this. I just being a new business. I just reminding that the road motorcycles and ATVs. I'd like us to address it. But the other thing, which is not necessarily new business, but it's just a concern. Shifting our attention to MTA for just a moment.
Yes.
I take public transportation fairly often. I am worried that even though there is supposed to be enforcement of mask wearing, I have yet to see a single person on all of my bus rides on the M7, the M11, M104, M57, M31, the 2, 3, the 1 trains. I have not seen anyone approach anyone. There's no one, just in my own personal observation. And I've seen a lot of people without masks. And what I'm worried about, besides getting COVID, is that it's going to scare people off from getting on the subways and public transportation. And it's going to just be this this awful problem of giving people confidence to come back. So Andrew, do you know anything about what kind of enforcement there has been?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks.
The MTA police and the bridge and tunnel officers are the people that can enforce the mask. The regular transit employee cannot and is encouraged to not do that. I'm reminded of a bus operator who told somebody you need a mask to board and he was punched out. I mean, it's just crazy time. Right. There is, however, 2 good pieces of news. One is the Sam Schwartz study that came out about a week ago that showed you are far less likely to catch COVID on public transportation than in several other indoor environments due to the replenishment of air on a regular basis through the ventilating system. The other good piece of news is that the Long Island Railroad is testing this air filtering thing now, which kills every kind of virus and has proven very encouraging at the moment. If this is a successful test, it can be moved to the subways and buses as well. We obviously must get people confident to come back to transit. Hopefully we will still have transit if these horrendous service cuts do not go in effect and we can get some federal help. Otherwise, it's 40% service cut on the subways and buses and a 50% service cut on the commuter rails is really a non-starter. It will change the New York way of life completely.
Going back, do you know how many people that the MTA police are? I
don't have the exact number, but they are rotating. They are moving around. There's a mask force every few weeks. I'm going to participate in one of them, giving out masks. What you said is what I have seen on many trains. I see 98% wearing masks and wearing them correctly. I see 1% without a mask at all, and 1% with the mask around their neck or just over their mouth, which is might as well be not wearing one. It's not doing any good.
By the way, the other thing, just incidentally, is that I think people are getting a little bit confused about when you're sitting in a restaurant and you're at your table, you can take your mask off to eat. A lot of people are now eating on the bus and train and taking their mask off. And I actually heard someone say, you got to put your mask on. Yeah, but I'm eating. Yeah, but you're not supposed to be eating on the bus and train anyway. And literally for 20 minutes of a particular commute, this person was just eating without a mask on and breathing. And it's just, I haven't seen anybody even making a suggestion in a position of authority.
Yes. And the $50 fine that was imposed a couple of weeks ago has raised mask usage somewhat.
Hey, Andrew, that filtration system you mentioned sounds amazing. Is that something we could get?
It is amazing.
Is that like just for transit, or can we get that in our schools?
I'm guessing that if it's successful on the Long Island Railroad, it will be expanded to Metro North and subways and buses. And I'm guessing everybody would want to take advantage of this because it has such promise. It would be a game changer.
I'm sorry, I have one last thing. This is before I forgot to. So we have occupancy limits, right, in restaurants and stores, and for various reasons. Again, I'm a proud strap hanger, but I have been on the bus when it gets very crowded, and I find myself, during rush hour, as people are coming back and using public transportation, I'm now 2 feet away from someone's face, whether they have a mask on or not. What I choose to do is get off the bus because I am scared. So I don't want to discourage anyone by having occupancy limits, but there's a practical issue here. If a bus is jam-packed, it's, the idea is 6 feet apart and a mask, not 6 feet apart, not a mask.
That's right. 6 feet apart and a mask, right. It's not always possible on public transportation, obviously, which is why we need this air filtration and or vaccine or combination of sooner rather than later. But that situation you described, Doug, if we had 40% service cuts, just imagine.
Yeah. Andrew, you have, I see Celeste Miller has her hand up. I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, I see that. Celeste, do you want to say something?
Yes, I do. I'd like to go back to the bicycles for a moment. And I know you're looking for new business for the agenda for next month. And this probably, I suspect, is not new business, but I appreciate the concern for bicyclists, but there's also a big concern, obviously, for pedestrians, particularly on Columbus and Amsterdam Avenue. There is minimal adherence to the one-way street by bicyclists, especially on Amsterdam. You're finding a lot of people coming downtown on the bike lane, and also paying attention to the lights, which the bicyclists are supposed to. And for me, and lots of people I know, we understand all this. For people coming from other places into the city, it's a huge safety issue. And
Yep.
I have to assume there's many, many, many accidents in the city where pedestrians are getting hurt. So again, I appreciate the concern for bicyclists. There are more pedestrians than bicyclists.
Absolutely. And everybody is a pedestrian, whether you take mass transit, drive, or are a bicyclist. You're a pedestrian at some point.
Could I respond to that?
Go ahead.
Two things. One is the data that we have doesn't show that there are a large number of pedestrians being injured by bicycles. Now, it could be that there are injuries that aren't reported, but chances are that those are less serious. Having said that, I completely agree with you, Celeste, that we need to protect pedestrians, especially vulnerable pedestrians. And in my mind, there's no excuse whatsoever for bicycles either riding the wrong way or riding on sidewalks. I've been begging for years for us to have a joint transportation BCI meeting to address the issue of delivery cycles. It's a very complicated issue. It gets into workers' rights, not workers' rights, but just low-paid workers, undocumented people who are barely surviving, if at all. And they're just complicated issues. I think we need to address the issue. It's a much longer conversation.
Absolutely.
And I beg us to have that joint meeting that we haven't had for years. And
we can try to schedule that. Just as an aside, I was at a restaurant on 2nd Avenue adjacent to the bike lane there. The way bikers are biking on 2nd Avenue, we're doing a much better job here on the west side. They are racing. Waiters have to take their lives in their hands to get to the outdoor seating. Bikes are on top of each other, and I saw several motorcycles and or scooters with license plates going down the bike lane there. So this is a citywide issue. Fortunately, I haven't seen too many go the wrong way on 2nd Avenue, but we've got big arrows on the sidewalk. I know the DOT has installed look both ways when you're crossing a bike lane, but I mean, stopping at the lights and going the right way, I think, is the minimum that we should ask for of bicyclists. And it protects them as well. But I think your idea of a joint meeting with BCI, Rich, because I'm guessing that the majority of folks going the wrong way on Amsterdam and Columbus are delivery folks. Who are trying to get their deliveries to their customers in the quickest possible fashion, and I understand that. I don't hear you, Rich. You're muted.
Yeah, it's what the customers are demanding. So I think part of the issue is making customers realize that if you want food to arrive in 30 seconds, you're basically forcing people to risk their lives and other people's lives.
You're forcing people to operate in an unsafe manner.
Mm-hmm. There's also the complication of a lot of the restaurants are outsourcing their delivery. So it's Seamless and these other companies that are basically forcing their workers to ride illegally in order to do the deliveries that they're being forced to make.
Have you brought this up to BCI at all, Rich?
I had under previous leadership.
Okay.
And I know
this is the first I'm hearing of this, but I'm glad to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah, and Steve Brown is really dying to have this meeting as well.
Yes, he is.
So we'll include
We'll
YEO as
schedule
well.
it. We will schedule it.
Good. Anything else?
Anything else, folks?
I guess that's it.
Guess that is it. Have a great evening and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks for everyone.
Thank you. Well done, both.